Doc, with all the news yesterday with the franchise tag, actually it was Monday, franchise tags, or Tuesday. Earlier in the week, the franchise tags were placed. We got news that there are going to be roster cuts. There are going to be official roster cuts starting next week, too. Was there anything that stood out to you before we get specific in any certain positions? Where was the biggest news for you in terms of either the franchise tags or players expected to be released and become free agents?
Yeah, you look at the Bills yesterday, went on a slashing spree. They needed to save some cap room, so they had a lot of players that they had to move on from. This is a time of year where teams are needing to kind of find their monies to get into the new year for free agency. So that's where you start to see some of the guys ages 27 and up, elevated contracts start to get, the general managers have to make tough decisions to get their roster spots in order and their salary cap in line so that they can potentially add new players. Look, to me, I was just monitoring those that are tagged that potentially could have, players that could have drawn interest from the Lions. And that's what's tough is that we all here in Detroit want high-end free agents.
Right.
And unfortunately, those guys that are supremely talented, like the Jalen Johnsons, like the L'Jarius Sneeds, they get tagged, and it's an advantage. It's a tool used by these teams to be able to, first and foremost, really – if a team wants a player of that caliber, then they're going to have to go out and trade for a player like L'Jarius Sneed or a Jalen Johnson. It makes it tough for the Lions because if you want a player of that caliber, you got to go out there and trade draft capital and give a player a big contract, which Brad Holmes hasn't been. Yep, it hasn't been shown that that's the strategy that he typically deploys. So it's been interesting across the league. A lot of the players that maybe the Lions fans would like have been franchise tagged. But still, there's still opportunities for Brad Holmes to improve this team.
Yeah, and speaking of which, John, I mean, we've seen how Jalen Johnson got tagged and Josh Allen and Brian Burns, and you've also saw, especially when it comes to the Buffalo Bills, a lot of players now being available on the open market. So after all that has happened in the last couple of days, where are you at right now when it comes to free agency? And by that, I mean, if there's one position of need that you would like to see the Lions make a move in free agency to improve their team, what would it be?
See you always, man. Sam in the booth. I want to say this. Look, clearly you guys understood and have talked about it with the move that the Lions made moving on from Jerry Jacobs. The Lions, for some reason, just have not been able to address the cornerback spot over the last several years. It's surprising because Aaron Glenn played that position, and it's just been a massive cluster F for the last several years. And you recognize last year it was a disaster towards the second half of the year. Jerry Jacobs ended up the year on IR and can't even see the field. And now the first signing you make is Emmanuel Moseley. I know he's a good dude, very, hardworking. Dan Campbell said that no player, he fully expects that Emmanuel Moseley will work hard to come back, but coming back from 2 ACL injuries, that's really tough. So the Lions have to deconstruct that cornerbacks room. And so if you're a fan, you don't want to go out there and get the Kendall Fullers or the Chidobe Awuzes of the world. Those are C-level free agents. I heard Broder in the background say, absolutely not. But if you're a fan, you need to be wanting the Lions to make the push for L'Jarius Sneed.
No.
He is a game changer. Look, Broder, you have this cap allocation. You need to go out there and upgrade the talent. You need a number one. And yes, you can find talent in the draft, but you're not going to count on a rookie in his first year to carry a defensive unit. You need an experienced veteran. And that's a spot at cornerback that has been you see a clear deficiency. L'Jarius Sneed's the top guy out there. And if you can finagle a third-round pick and maybe a pick in 2025, along with, potentially offering him a $19 to $20 million a year contract for 2 or 3 years, I make the move. I think Brad Holmes needs to send the message that the time is now to win at this level. And I think L'Jarius Sneed, look at the numbers. He barely gave up, I think, no or one touchdown the entire year. He played for Steve Spagnuolo, one of the best defensive coordinators in the entire league. There's so much positivity that I think the risk is not that great. And I'm really confused by people that say, oh, we don't want to spend money. We don't want to spend. Okay, if you trade draft capital, you don't think that Brad Holmes can finagle getting it back or maneuvering to get more picks? Come on, guys. You can't be scared of giving up draft capital because Brad Holmes has shown that, okay, I give up some here. I could trade a little bit from the back to come back to get the players that you need. You need high-end talent to win big games. And I think L'Jarius Sneed puts the rest of the NFC on notice.
Hey, John, how's it going, brother?
It's going great, man. Blessed. I feel good. Looking good. Feeling good. Some good talk here, man. I'm feeling good.
Yeah. Now, look, so I hear you talking about L'Jarius Sneed needing to be the guy. Are you saying if they're looking specifically at cornerback, or is there another big-time free agent that you think that money will be better spent on to be able to bolster this defensive unit as a whole? Because obviously one of the things that's been kind of talked about or bandied about, at least on this network, has been cornerback or defensive line help, L'Jarius Sneed, or another chief, Chris Jones. Where do you believe this money is best allocated?
Yeah, I believe it, obviously clearly on defense. You've seen that the unit took a stride forward in 2023. In 2022, it was the unit that was one of the worst in the National Football League. Now in 2023, they take a step up to be around 18th, 19th. And yes, I do believe that, you know, in the draft and in free agency, you're going to see upgrades along the interior of the defensive line and as well as to the secondary. Clearly, the safety unit and the linebacker unit, I believe, are growing. You have young players. There's more, I think, foundational pieces there that are more steady and consistent. In the secondary, I just think that you need 2 or 3 cornerbacks, probably one in the draft, 1 or 2 in the draft, and 1 in free agency. The interior of the defensive line, you're hearing, you know, people clamor for the like you said, Chris Jones or Danielle Hunter, or those that are potentially able to wreck games from the interior. I look at it, and a team that kind of produced a good defense that has players that are interesting is the Dolphins. I like Christian Wilkins. I like what he brings to the table. I think he would be a little bit costly, a little bit more elevated. But if you want to take a swing, I think, too, if you guys are looking for names of players that potentially could be targeted by the Lions, I think the Dolphins have a couple guys. Linebacker Van Ginkel with the flowing hair. You'd have the linebacker crew with Van Ginkel and Anzalone, and they got a guard, I think, that's going to be coveted by a lot of teams. And Robert Hunt. I mean, that guy can fill a lot of needs. And in speaking to sources from Miami, they just tell me that, man, he's a good dude. He's an individual that can really be adaptable, and is really the thing that most teams covet. He's got a good availability. And for the Detroit Lions, they haven't been as good. Brad Holmes has been great in the draft, but he hasn't been great in free agency, swinging for guys that have been often injured and going the cheaper route. So I'm hoping that they really, if they look, guys, it's that close with that offense and Ben Johnson returning. If that defense can take another step forward, the Super Bowl is within reach for the Detroit Lions.